Hello everybody, welcome to Phoenixville Public Library, those in person and on Zoom. I'm Mark Pinto, the Adult Services Director here, and we are pleased to have this program tonight in advance of the holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas. They're fast approaching the season for eating, and we are pleased to have with us tonight a local author whose life has revolved around food. Although you wouldn't know what to look at her, okay? Janice O'Brien. Folks on Zoom, please feel free to chime in at any time with questions during your presentation by either typing in the chat or unmuting yourself. Janice, take it away.
First of all, thank you all for coming from far and near. My family, my friends, everyone here, my neighbors. I really appreciate the support. And a special thank you to Mark. If it wasn't for Mark and all his hard work, I wouldn't have the opportunity to do this. He really is supportive of all the writers and poets and authors in the community, and thank you, Mark. We really all appreciate it to have a voice here. Lori Shapiro, a food historian, states, "Food happens every day, realize it or not. Everyone has a relationship with food from the day you were born till the day you die. We all have to eat." I'm basically going to talk about the project that turned out to be this book. If you can believe it, it started in 2004 when I worked at Kinko's. Kinko's was a place similar to the UPS store. They had copying, printing, marketing, and I was in their management program, but to do that you had to work in a retail spot. And in the end it didn't work out, but that's okay. I learned a lot, and I learned that copying is a lot harder than one would think. But at the time there, they had binding materials, so I got the idea to make a cookbook of family recipes. We had so many recipes from my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my mother, my aunts, neighbors. I decided I wanted to put a book together for my daughters, Joy, who's online, and Robin, who's here. So I put this book together in 2004. So fast forward, I was working still full-time then, and a couple of years later, I took a writing, I went to a writing conference at Skidmore College up in New York State, and we had to present something to write that we wrote. So I had written a few paragraphs about some of the recipes, and when the teacher read it, she said, "Oh, is this for your book?" And it's like, "No, I'm not writing a book. This is just really recipes." So she said, "No, you should be writing a book. This is really a great idea." But I just put it away, and nothing happened till 2015. So that was, 11 years later. So 2015, my dear friend Sindhui Magona, the South African award-winning author, was teaching a seminar in Georgia State University, and I went to visit her for the week. So she asked me, "Well, what are you going to do the 2 hours every day that I'm not, with you?" I said, "Well, I don't know, probably sightsee around Atlanta. There's a lot of, I haven't been here in a long time." She said, "No, you're writing that book." So she made me sit at the desk and write. So over that 10 hours, I wrote 20 more stories. But once again, I put it away. I actually lived in, Bryn Mawr at the time. I was just about to move to Phoenixville, but then I got the job at the Chamber of Commerce, and I was traveling and socializing and doing other things and writing poetry. So I put the book on hold, and actually I did then self-publish my little poetry book in 2015. Poems I wrote when I wasn't talking. Talking and eating, those are my favorite things. So, but this is a little book. This is only 81 pages. So I went on, and then finally in the end of January 2022, I left the chamber reluctantly, but I moved on, and I decided to concentrate on my book. So I put together this book. So I wrote it, then people helped me edit it. I had a content editor. I laid it out, went through many phases of proofreading, and finally published it in early July, and then had actually the big launch October 15th. But that's actually just the start of the work. The marketing is actually the hardest part. So here it's done, but there's a lot more to it. So I do have social media, but I'm not that active on it, so I'm trying to do more. I'm putting things on LinkedIn. I'm having a few book signings, like the one here. But I think from all the research I've done, I will be doing Amazon ads, which seems to be the most sensible, believe it or not. With Amazon, they actually only charge you if someone clicks on your ad. And it doesn't look like an ad. It just shows as a book that you might want to read. So if you put in food memoir or cookbook, something to that effect, they'll list my book, and then I can pay whatever I can pay, anywhere from 24 cents to 51 cents for each click, and then I can put a cap on it. So I could put a $10 a day cap, $20 a day cap, but I've researched this thoroughly, so I'm actually going to post it next Tuesday, because I think with Thanksgiving coming and Black Friday, I think everybody's gonna start shopping. And not that I'm a big fan of Amazon, but 85% of people buy their books on Amazon. Even I found out the library bought my book on Amazon. So that was kind of, shocking.
We do what we gotta do.
I know, you gotta do what you gotta do. So,
Jen, did you publish through Amazon then?
yes, it really is one way to go, but the only way to go. I mean, people want to see reviews. People want to be able to get it. I have only put up the hard copy. I mean the full book. I have not put up the Kindle yet. I will do that probably after Christmas, and that will, of course, will be a lot less expensive. And I mean, even now that I've had this book, I've sold like 3 or 4 more of the other book that hasn't been sold really in a couple of years. So people are getting more, see it, and that book is only $5, so people are buying it. So are there any questions up to now? Because I'm going to read a couple of passages. No? So I decided, of course, I should read about Thanksgiving. This is chapter 15. It's called Thanksgiving at China Joy. Growing up and living near all 4 of my grandparents during my childhood was a blessing. Spending time together, they shared stories about growing up, their parents, their siblings, school, and described specific events in history. I got a glimpse into my ancestors' lives and established a deep connection to the past that I appreciate now. For Thanksgiving, we went to Grandma and Grandpa Jobson's house, except for Aunt Nancy, whose family lived in Iowa. When Grandpa retired, he and Grandma moved to Florida, and those family gatherings ended. So instead, Uncle Jim, Aunt Carolyn, and Pat coming to our house that first Christmas, they decided to visit to Florida to see my grandparents' new home. Mom was really upset that no one planned to come to our house for dinner on Thanksgiving. She decided we'd start a new tradition, and the idea excited us all. So on Thanksgiving morning, the 4 of us made our way into New York City to watch the Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade. I remember the anticipation of seeing gigantic balloons, marching bands, and the Rockettes, who I had seen a couple of times at Radio City Music Hall. My most vivid memory of the parade was that my feet froze, standing on the concrete sidewalk, wearing only black patent leather Mary Janes with thin white anklets. Dad told me to jump up and down to get warm, but that didn't really help. In the late 1950s, women never wore pants, especially on a holiday. So Mom wore a dress and high heels that made her feet ache. Dad wore a suit and his camel hair top coat, and Hank had a sport jacket and tie under his winter jacket. Once we finally got to wave at Santa sitting high up on his sled, we made our way quickly across town to our car as fast as our feet carried us. We loved the parade, but we were cold and standing in one place for almost 3 hours. To drive home was a quick trip over the George Washington Bridge, and we made a final turn off the highway. When we made a final turn off the highway, Mom remembered we didn't have dinner reservations on such a busy day at restaurants, but she had an idea where we could eat. How about doing something very on Thanksgiving, like, let's go to China Joy, Mom said. Oh, we loved Chinese food and couldn't wait to get there. We were hungry. So sitting alone with no other customers in the restaurant felt strange. The staff gave us wonderful service and was happy we were there. Our meal was a treat as we enjoyed egg rolls, spare ribs, and wonton soup to start. Mom ordered dishes for all of us to share. Chicken chop suey, pork fried rice, shrimp foo young, and beef chow mein. Choices on the menus in the 1950s were limited, not like the extensive Asian menus of today. The food was flavorful, and we enjoyed our time eating there. After dinner, we were full, but we enjoyed drinking tea from the ceramic cups and breaking open our cookies to read our fortunes, along with eating refreshing orange wedges. Mom said, see, we didn't miss the turkey on Thanksgiving. As we were putting on our coats, Dad had a smile on his face. We all looked around toward the back of the dining room and saw the waiters, kitchen help, and owners gathered around the long table. At the head, the chef stood carving a beautiful roasted turkey. The staff was about to enjoy a traditional dinner when we ate Chinese dishes. We talked about that day for many years. The following Thanksgiving, since cold temperatures were predicted, we decided we would watch the parade at home. Mom made reservations at the Farm, a favorite restaurant that served a traditional American-style Thanksgiving dinner. It was almost as delicious as Grandma's, with stuffing, gravy, and cranberries, plus pumpkin pie. Mom enjoyed eating out the most. She was smiling the entire time we ate. Not only did she get a break from cooking, but there were no dirty dishes, pots, or pans to be washed, dried, or put away by me. We both got a break. But the next morning at breakfast, I thought to myself, we don't have any turkey leftovers. But I didn't mention it. Dad was the one to ask, what are we eating for the rest of the weekend? Thinking fast, Mom said, well, I'll drive down to Lou's butcher shop and see if there's any turkeys left. Luckily, he had several, so Mom roasted a small bird and made her delicious bread stuffing with fluffy white potatoes covered with savory gravy. It was a scaled-down dinner, but I think we missed the traditional dishes more than we thought. It was delicious. I have another one.
No turkey tacos?
I'll tell you, in the 1950s, I never even heard of a taco. Those foods were not available in those days. Sukiyaki Saturday. Try to change it up a little, but still in the Asian market. From the minute I stepped through the red lacquered door, I was in love. A woman wearing an exquisite silk kimono, obi, and split-toed socks with wooden-soled sandals greeted us. White makeup covered her face in contrast to her bright scarlet lips. With an ivory comb pushed in her shiny black hair, I thought she looked flawless. She bowed with only smiling eyes. Grandpa reciprocated by bowing and greeting her in Japanese. Grandpa spoke Japanese? I never knew that. She motioned for us to follow her. Inside the restaurant, I was transported to a place I had never been. Within minutes, I knew I wanted to visit Japan. I wanted to learn Japanese. I wanted to be Japanese. The serene setting of the restaurant was unlike anywhere I'd ever visited before. That Saturday had a tremendous impact on my view of food, art, and culture for my entire life. The hostess led us to a room where the walls were made from rice paper panels on wooden frames. A standard-sized table and chair sat in the middle of the room. Since my grandparents were in their late 60s and probably not interested or even capable of sitting on the floor to eat their meal, once seated, a woman came in, also dressed in a beautiful kimono, to offer us hot, damp towels to fresh in our hands. The thoughtfulness displayed in this ritual strengthened my affection for the Japanese even more. And my third, well, I have four, but I don't know if you want to hear them. I'll hear, the third one's one of the favorite. Mentions one of the foods on the cover. It's chapter 24, pizza, pizza, pizza. Pizza. I'm not sure why I have such an attachment to pizza, but I absolutely love it. Every time I take a bite, it's the most satisfying one. The crust I prefer is a thin New York style with a strong crunch. If it's baked in a wood-burning stove, I like it to be slightly burnt on the bottom. I like it to be, the pizza should be covered, not drowned, in a rich tomato sauce made with olive oil. There should be a hint of garlic with dashes of oregano. I like it cheesy, but not so much it becomes greasy. I favor 3 toppings, all separate from each other: pepperoni, mushrooms, or mushrooms. But I'm completely content eating a plain slice. If I had to choose to eat one food for the rest of my life, it would be pizza. My job as an art director at Quinlan, Keene, Peck and McShay in Indianapolis began after Jim and I settled into our new home when he was transferred. With New York work experience, I had 3 job offers, but this one appeared to be the best fit for my skill set and my career goals, and it turned out to be a valuable experience learning how to deal with clients. One Friday, Sheldon, our manager, rewarded our team by ordering pizza. We sat around the conference room table and waited for lunch to be served. Finally, Sheldon walked in carrying 4 large square boxes and placed them in the middle of the table. We lined up holding paper plates and ready to grab a slice. But when I saw what was in the first box, I couldn't believe my eyes. Small pieces of ham and pineapple covered the entire surface of the 14-inch pie. Never being one to keep my emotions to myself or keep my mouth shut, I blurted out, "That's not pizza." Sheldon said, "Calm down, Janice, you're not in New York anymore. This is Indiana-style pizza." My heart sank. This was sacrilegious. I couldn't eat it. I stepped outside, dropped my empty plate into the waste paper basket, walked back to my seat holding a warm can of Diet Coke. My mind raced. Where would we find a decent pizza to eat? I sat quietly, feeling dejected, like I lost my best friend. How would I manage to live without a great pizza? It seemed the only local option was Pizza Hut, a franchise that hadn't even reached the East Coast at that time in 1973. We never found a pizzeria in Indianapolis. For 2 years, we embraced the friendly, less hectic Midwestern environment. Prices of everything were considerably lower than back east, and we lived in the most beautiful house that we ever owned. But there was no place to get a decent slice of pizza. It was difficult to handle our disappointment about not finding authentic Italian food like back east that we enjoyed eating. Okay, can you take one more?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, this one's about West Philly, and this is the original, the first part is the original thing I wrote in my book in 2004. My aunt and uncle used to live in West Philly on Litchfield Street, and it was my favorite place to go in the 1950s and early 60s. Trips to West Philly, Aunt Carolyn. West Philly. When I was 9 years old, that was my favorite destination. Packed with laughter, fun, and prolonged periods of pleasurable eating, we traveled weekends and holidays to Aunt Carolyn and Uncle Jim's. We cruised down the Jersey Turnpike in Dad's '48 Cadillac on Friday nights that grew into monthly visits. I treasured those jaunts. We always brought someone with us: Dad's best friend, Uncle Joe, my cousins from Dad's side of the family, Mary or Rusty, or our aunts Nettie and Mary. There was plenty of food and room for extra guests. And Carolyn had the tiniest kitchen I ever saw. At the rear of her red brick row home on Litchfield Street, gingham curtains framed a window looking out over the alley. Clotheslines zigzagged above the cars with kids playing in between garbage cans. It was a bird's eye view of the neighborhood. With limited counter space, a gold-flecked Formica table was the only workspace. How did such a remarkable cook like Aunt Carolyn prepare extravagant meals in such tiny quarters? One Saturday morning, I sat down and watched Aunt Carolyn make lasagna. Her sauce simmered for hours on top of her small gas range. She added sweetened hot sausage that she browned. And tasting a spoonful, a smile came over her face. "Perfect," she said. It was at that moment I realized that the key ingredient in her food was love. Everything she made tasted mouth-watering. To cook delicious meals takes more than talent. It takes a special kind of passion, something that had been passed down through her family for generations. Sitting in the kitchen with my aunt, everyone else was around the dining room table, eating, laughing, drinking coffee or tea, and smoking. No wonder I didn't sit with them. Fascinated with her cooking skills, I wanted to learn to make delicious food too. Her lasagna was chock full of sausage, brown chopped meat, crema ricotta, mozzarella, and freshly grated Parmesan, alternating with layers of thick, curly noodles. To me, the lasagna appeared at least 3 inches high, but looking back, I'm sure that the Pyrex dishes were only 2 inches deep. And Carolyn always made 2 lasagnas at once, putting one in the freezer for a later date. Finally finished, and Carolyn covered the baking dishes and placed the lasagna in the refrigerator for dinner. In the early evening when it was time to eat, Aunt Carolyn hit a gong to let the guests know dinner was ready to be served. Everyone felt the sound and vibration throughout the 3-story house. It got everyone's attention, and we all moved to the seats around the dining room table that seated 12. My cousin Pat, her fiance Danny, Mom, Dad, Aunt Carolyn, Uncle Jim, Uncle Joe, Aunt Nettie, and Carolyn's closest friends, Laura and Bob, Hank, and me. Luckily, there wasn't a children's table, so we sat with the grown-ups. That's a reference to another story about where I have to sit at the children's table. Besides lasagna, Saturday evenings, my dinner may include standing rib roast or pork loin. Serving dishes and platters filled the table from one end to the other. My mouth is watering thinking about the juicy, tender slices of meat covered in Aunt Carolyn's savory gravy. Sides included 2 kinds of potatoes, mashed and scalloped, along with dishes of sweet potatoes, green beans, and spinach casserole, all family favorites.
Good job.
So hopefully that has whetted your appetite. Now, in the book, I have the 10 most popular family recipes that my family made over the years. I also have the best food list, and I left copies out in the front of the local places. I kept this list for probably 30 years of places that I went. But locally, I have some savory things like, and like the best hamburger, I say, is at the Stonehouse Grill in Kimberton. And the best mushroom soup at Longwood Gardens in Kennett Square. So.
When? Because they've changed in.
Oh, they have? Oh, well, this is probably.
Changed quite a bit.
Oh, it's not as good as it used to be.
Pardon?
It's not as good as it used to be?
I wouldn't say that, but it's just that they've changed.
Oh, it's changed. It's different.
I've had at least 4 different ones there.
Oh, well, no, I always look forward, that's one thing we do when we go, which hasn't been in quite a long time. Does anyone online have any questions or any comments?
Yep, feel free to unmute yourselves, folks, or
I got a
type in the
question
chat.
for you.
Sure.
I have a question. So you mentioned at the beginning that you got a lot of feedback. And sometimes that's really hard to hear feedback. How did you deal with it? Like, what was the best feedback you got, and perhaps what was the most challenging feedback that you had to consider as you wrote your book?
Well, people were always supportive, they liked the ideas of the stories, but sometimes when I had the content editor read through it, and she only read through probably about maybe 60% of the chapters, there were things really mixed up, and if anyone really has talked to me for any length of time, they know I don't tell a story in a straight line. And so that was really, so it wasn't a criticism, it was just really helping me hone in and getting things in order, and, you know, and there was a lot of grammatical errors, I mean, beyond the ones that most people notice. But as I say in the book, I did the best I could, and, you know, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I don't have the funding to have a real expensive proofreader.
I guess you're true to your authentic self.
Yes,
That's
I
good.
am true to
That's
myself.
good.
It's all about the recipes and just the food.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Chris?
Janice, I couldn't help but notice there's no pizza on this.
Well, it's been hard around here, and, well, I'm gluten-free, but I do eat pizza. I'm not gluten-free, well,
Okay.
once in a while, but like maybe once every 2 or 3 months, I'll have 2 or 3 slices of pizza if we splurge. You know, I don't know, look, I mean, I've eaten a lot of pizza around here, but
Have you had friend zones in Bridgeport?
no. Oh, well, I'll have to write that down.
Mm.
Okay, well,
We're
I'll
always
take any
looking for
suggestions.
Right.
I'll take any suggestions.
Friend
What is it,
zones.
friends?
zones.
Friend
Oh,
zones.
yeah.
I never heard, yeah, I've never even heard of it. It's not that far.
Not far at all.
Where is it?
Oh, it's worth the drive, okay.
Yeah.
Next one, we're going there.
There are enough pizza joints around this.
Well, there are, and, you know, I used to love, what was downtown? Franco's.
Franco's.
I used to love
Friend
Franco's.
zones.
Friends.
Mhm.
I like Franco's downtown, but he moved, and not that I couldn't go where he is now, he's in Orisford. And I like Vecchia at a time, but I'm not fond of like a margarita pizza, I want like New York style. So hard.
So your favorite's in New York
Yeah.
or New Jersey?
Yeah, well. North
Well, I'm
Jersey.
asking, is it
Yeah,
New York
yeah.
or New Jersey?
Well, North Jersey was similar to New York. But that's a good
Hi,
question.
Janet.
Hi, Cindy.
Oh my God, this is so exciting. I'm calling, or I'm watching everything over here halfway across the world in Australia.
Oh.
I've been reading your book and I've got a little sticky note on here, all these pages I want to talk to you about, but I'm only going to mention one thing.
Okay.
So we can do that in private, but I was reading on your chapter 8, Mrs. Dull.
Mrs. Dull, yeah, that was the,
Mrs.
Dull. Mhm.
Yeah, and you finally got her cookbook, you said.
Yeah,
You found her cookbook.
Yeah, I found it online. Yeah, well, they reprinted it actually. It was first printed in 1916, and those are the copies that my grandfather had for everyone in the family. But I'm sure my mother probably threw hers out because she really didn't use it that much, and I don't know what happened to my grandparents. That was probably thrown out too. But they reprinted it, so. Yeah, the interesting thing about Mrs. Dull was one of the most influential women of her time in the South for Southern cooking. She was one of the first women that even had a cookbook in 1916. Her husband was very ill, and she had 5 or 6 children, so she had to find a way to work, and which she did, and she became the food editor of the Atlanta Journal. Atlanta Journal? Yeah, the Atlanta Journal. So she started working. But the interesting thing about Mrs. Dull's cookbook is that there's 1,500 recipes in this book, but there's no instruction, because in 1916, all the women knew how to do everything, so they didn't need any instruction. Yeah, it was interesting, just maybe slaughter the chicken, cut it up, and things like that. They had to do that themselves. It's really quite interesting.
Wow. That's too bad, because there's a recipe in there, and I'm not gonna go find it now. I said, I wanna know what that is, how to make that, so.
Oh, okay, well, I'll find it for you and send it to you.
And then there's the one last thing about pizza. I totally agree. If there's one food that I would eat, would be pizza. And living in Australia, I have not been able to find good New York style pizza until last week, a new restaurant opened up in Harvey Bay where I am called Sopranos. And they're
Oh, wow.
Italian.
That's a good- that's a
That
good-
sounds like it, yeah. Good.
Yeah, and I had one of their pizzas and their, even all their pasta dishes, I can't find a good sauce, I'm so used to good Italian food living in the States. So all their meals and their pizza that I've had there is out of this world. It's excellent. So I'm really thrilled to have found finally a good pizza and good Italian.
That's a good treat. I know, it's hard when you
Yeah,
are used to certain type of food and you can't get it.
yeah, yep,
Oh, good. Well, thank you for signing on.
thank you.
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you talk about your, tell the story of your mother's recipe box?
Oh,
That you were
so
telling me the other night?
last Sunday, which was only a few days ago, there was a book sale at Solis Farms, which is on Kimberton Road. It's a day spa, actually. It's a spiritual center. So there were 12 authors there, and I brought my books to sell. And there was another author in the room who noticed that I had brought some of my cookbooks with me, actually. And I brought my little holder. It's like a little metal box where all my recipe cards were. My mother had given the recipe card box to me for my bridal shower in August of 1970. So that's a long time ago, 53 years ago. So she said, "Oh, I love retro-looking things, and where did you get it?" And so I said, "Well, my mother gave it to me." So she said, "Well, who manufactured that? Like, what's the name on the bottom?" Now, I've had this box, obviously, for 53 years. I've taken it every place I've lived and used it all the time. And when I looked on the bottom, it said Superior Manufacturing, Phoenixville, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
I still can't get over it. It's like my mind has been blown. And I mean, maybe 53 years ago, I looked at it and it didn't mean anything to me, but it was wild that here I am. So on Monday night, actually, Ryan Conroy was here and gave a wonderful program, as he always does. He's the local historian. And so I had it and showed him, and he said, "Oh yes, my mother has that. Every woman in Phoenixville used to have that back in the 70s. I don't know, Buffy, you've lived here a long time. Did you ever see one of those boxes?
Well, my grandmother had one of those, but I don't know if it was, I thought it was called Superior too, but.
Oh, it might have been.
It might have been, but I don't know if it was from Superior.
Oh, that's interesting.
She lived on Second Avenue and she had her little box. and
Yep,
that's where we got it.
probably
I still have
did.
some of the
Yeah,
box,
well, you
the
can buy
index
them on
box.
eBay, actually. They're
Yeah.
$12.95. That we've got a couple. So,
Now, that included the recipes, it wasn't.
no. Well, my mother wrote out, and my mother typed a lot. She had been a secretary, so she typed on little index cards all the recipes. My grandmother too. Yeah.
So the box was just the box.
The box, and then she put the index cards. It has A through Z. I have none for, I do have quiche. I don't think I have any for Z, but I have quite a few. A lot of chicken. That's what I think I mentioned in the book. We used to have, I write a lot about recipes and where I got the recipes, but back when I was a young bride and even when I was a young mother, we used to have chain letters that women would send and want recipes. And, but I always loved doing that, so I would, you get a letter and then you're supposed to send 7 letters to your friends to send a recipe, but the majority of those recipes were chicken or they were, what was the other, desserts. But I probably had 1,000 chicken recipes. There are probably 10,000 ways to make chicken. So I have my books for sale, they're $15, and I have my poetry book for sale, that's $5. And, well, actually, I'm sorry, it's $8, but together you could have both for for 20. Discount.
Is that your final offer?
But I appreciate everyone's support. It's been really exciting. I hope to do more. I'm gonna do an event with the chamber after the first of the year.
Oh, good.
Yeah, hopefully one of the restaurants or eating places, and
That'd be awesome.
hopefully I'll be having a book signing at Barnes and Noble after the first year, and some of the other bookshops.
And Janice,
Hi,
can I say
Lori.
something?
Yes,
Of
please, go
course.
ahead.
Janice,
Hi, Lori.
I just want to say I am reading, I'm loving it. And I want to say, first of all, you had me hysterical when you said, you don't tell a story in a straight line. That is so, I love how you express that. And I just love the warmth
Aw.
of your writing. I love that you take me back to an era that is, very heartfelt, and it takes me back to my own family memories and get-togethers with family and grandma and my aunts and uncles. So there's something very charming about your authentic writing, and I just wanted to put that plug in for you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, so I highly recommend it.
Thanks. Good plug.
Ginger J says, thank you so much. Great to see you and hear you reading a few of your chapters. All right. Anyone else on Zoom or in the room?
No?
All right. Thanks so much, Janice, for being
Oh,
here.
you're quite welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.